Repairing a trampoline part in the workshop. Recent high winds overturned a trampoline in the garden of a friend and it was damaged. This video shows how I repaired it without using my MIG Welder. In this clip you can see the damage quite clearly. This is, or was, one of the supports for around the edge to hold the netting to stop people falling off the trampoline. Fixing this part by welding is slightly problematic for a few reasons. Even though the part is rusty, it is actually galvanized. I once had a trampoline and it was okay for a few years and then it fell apart because it wasn't galvanized inside the tubes. This component is made from very thin metal, and the fact that it's sort of galvanized means I would have to grind that off before welding, and I think it would just be a thorough mess. The job starts by taking a measurement to find out how long the part was to start with. As shown here, it's 80 centimeters. I thought it would be a good idea to clean out the end of the tube to get rid of any livestock. Now it's clean and the job can begin. What I'm going to do is saw off the damaged end, using my extremely old and extremely good metal cutting bandsaw. If you don't have a bandsaw, then a hacksaw would cut it just as well. But using the bandsaw is just quicker, and in no time at all, the end falls onto the floor. In this clip you can see that the part is still damaged. I need this piece of tube to be square internally. I've put the shank of an old lathe tool in the vise. It's a carbide tipped lathe tool, so the shank is soft. You must never do what I'm doing at the moment with a piece of high-speed steel, because that would probably shatter and fly all over the place. In any case, it didn't work by holding the lathe tool shank like this. Instead, I positioned the lathe tool vertically, and with a few blows from my copper-faced hammer, the piece of steel tube once again became square. Now to tackle the other end of the tube. One thing that you must not do, never ever ever do this. For a brief moment in time I thought, well, I'll just part off the end of this tube, but as I was tightening the jaws of the chuck, the jaws were just crushing the piece of tube. If I'd have touched this piece of tube with a parting tool, that would have been the end of it. Instead, I took the piece of tube over to the bandsaw and in vertical mode I chopped off the end. Then I tightly clamped the piece of tube in the chuck jaws, but this time I'm not using a parting tool, I'm using this knife tool to take some very gentle cuts just to square up the end of the tube. The metal that this tubing is made from is very poor stuff. Once I'd cleaned up the end of the piece of tube, I used a deburring tool to get rid of the mess around the edge. That's enough tube work. Now I need to turn a piece of proper steel. The first part of the job is to face across the end. I'm going to turn down this piece of steel so that it fits into the piece of tubing. I meant to mention earlier, I am using my Smart & Brown lathe for this because it's a much larger machine and the piece of tubing, and indeed this piece of steel, will fit all the way down the headstock. Originally the plan was to turn down the piece of steel to match the tube, and here using my digital caliper I'm just finding out what the size of the tube is. I then used the caliper to find out what the inside diameter of the tube was, and that's what I'm turning this down to. This seemed to be a good plan at the time until I looked down the end of the piece of tubing and realised that it wasn't seamless and there was sort of a weld all the way down it. Not a big problem though. I used a half-round file to make the inside of the tube smooth. In this clip I've turned the piece of bar around in the chuck and I'm machining the other end of the bar to a diameter that will fit in the square part of the tubing. When doing jobs like this, it is so easy to go over the top and make the part too heavy, and the part will break again at the weakest point, or the repaired part may fall off the trampoline and hit someone on the head, so I want it to be light in weight. So what I'm doing here is drilling all the way down this bar and making it lighter. I hammered the piece of bar down into the tube, and here I'm hammering the square part onto the other end of the bar. Once I'd finished the job, I gave it a coat of etching primer, and this is what it looks like. I wanted to make this video to show how to do a job very simply without welding, and it's quite neat and it's fairly stylish. And hopefully this part should give a few more years of service. This video is a little bit shorter than normal because I have computer problems and currently I'm copying all the data onto a backup drive. And because of that, the editing process is very slow. All the data should be copied successfully in about 24 hours time. That's it for this video. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for watching and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.